Welcome to another episode of Tanstwocents. Today's episode is titled The Far Overhaul. Today we're tackling a seismic shift in federal contracting. The government is rewriting its entire playbook from a massive FAR overhaul to top down category management strategy. And the goal stated is efficiency, but the result is a landscape that fundamentally favors consolidation, potentially squeezing out small businesses that form the backbone of the defense industrial base. I'm your host, Tanwilson, and today with us is the perfect guy for this conversation, Sam Lee. Sam is the founder of Sam Lee Law and a former director for policy at the SBA and the publisher of GovCon Intelligence, a must read newsletter that's been tracking these changes in every step of the way. Sam, thanks for joining us here today. Say hello to our listeners, who we call the Intellectuals, and tell them a little bit about yourself.
It's my pleasure to be here. Hello, Intellectuals. That's a great name for that. Uh, as Con said, I'm Sam Lee. I'm the founder of Sam Lee Law. I'm a lifelong Virginian. And when I went to school at the University of Virginia, I was a freelance journalist, both in undergrad and when I was there for law school. And then after law school, I started a law firm, but then ended up at the Small Business Administration. I was there for 17 years, first as a lawyer, and then as the director of policy. I was one of the leading small business advocates in the federal government. And during the time that I had that role, we increased government contracting to small businesses by 50%, all the way to 180 billion. And for that, I was named America's Small Business Champion. So now that I'm out of government and I'm in private practice, running my own law firm, I am a strong supporter of small business contracting, and I still try to get into that journalism type role from time to time using my newsletter, which is GovCon Intelligence, like govconintelligence.com. My office is here in Fairfax, Virginia, and my hope is to serve small businesses in the DC area, Virginia, Maryland, and across the country using the knowledge that I gained at SBA during my 17 years. I wrote the regulations for SBA and on the FAR with the small business part there, Part 19. So I'm the person that you can come to help guide you through the SBA and FAR regulations. And there's a lot of guidance needed, as you mentioned, at this time. There's a lot happening both on the SBA side and with changes to the federal acquisition regulation.
Yeah, so we can blame you and we can come and ask you questions about everything. So this will be a really great episode for those who are big policy wonks who have been following all of this. I'm going to wait for the Cliff Note version, and I'll just continue to, follow you on LinkedIn. As you said, there's so much information out there. You could spend hours and days going through this, but I love the fact that you're from Virginia. We just moved from Virginia. My son wants to go back to UVA, so I might be hitting you up here in a couple of years for a recommendation to get him in.
I'd love to give you a tour of the grounds. Don't call it a campus, it's called the grounds, and we can take you around the lawn and the rotunda.
There you go. I'll take you up on that. So, but before we get into a lot of talks about the FAR, the parts, the executive orders, the different changes that are going on, I like to have a little bit of fun here, and we'll take jabs at the government and we'll take jabs at industry throughout. But if you had to compare the federal procurement policy to a movie, because I'm a huge movie buff. I can binge several movies in a weekend. What would it be? And you can't say Groundhog Day. Okay, that's just taking like the easy way out.
Uh, that's a great question. I'm also the dad of two girls, two teenagers, 13-year-old Caroline and 15-year-old Sophie. So we watch a lot of Disney movies in our house, and it's always on replay. And so, of the movies that I'm most familiar with, I'd probably say Moana, which is a really good, hopeful Disney movie. Moana's the hero, and she has to navigate the seas along with her buddy Maui, who is Dwayne Johnson. And so you can kind of think of Moana as the procurement workforce. They're trying to do the right thing. They have a really important mission. They have a lot of things coming at them at one time. And Maui is a character who's a shapeshifter. He can turn into anything.
Yeah.
and but you can't always tell which direction he's going, and kind of think of that as the procurement policy leaders, like I used to be, but also the people at GSA and the FAR Council and the White House, and you don't necessarily know what direction they're going into. It could be category management, it could be higher small business goals, and it changes from time to time. And then the ocean, which is just so unpredictable. That's just kind of everything else that happens in this world. Budgets, and you're waiting until the end of the year, and then you get a new mission from up high, or you have to send everything through the secretary's office. Like all this stuff that the procurement workforce has to deal with. But in the end, you have this great soundtrack from Lin-Manuel Miranda, and the movie did well enough to go on to a sequel. So we're going to keep this train going.
Okay. I like the movie. That I think everybody can resonate with that. And definitely this year, a couple of hurricanes, some tsunamis, even though we're into like hurricane season right now, but we have yet to have smooth sailing waters. But hopefully we can close out the year with, some stable seas, let's just say. So here's hoping.
Yes, and I have the soundtrack going through my head right now. I probably listen to that on repeat for 4 straight years.
Oh no, we'll have to kind of play this in the background when we do some editing for this podcast. So that's great. Fun movie. But so let's dive into it, shall we, with our first segment, which is the far overhaul. And a lot of people are asking, what is really going on? This massive rewrite was kicked off by the executive order 14275 and is now in full swing. And we've seen some significant revisions in some key areas like FAR Part 6 on competition and Part 10 on market research. But the pace isn't slowing down, and but these two parts really do impact, businesses of, who listen to us here on this podcast. So, Sam, in your GovCon intelligence article last week, you had a pretty alarming headline: "The FAR Council Strikes Back." I love the movie reference to, Empire Strikes Back, on how the latest FAR rewrite hurts small business competition. And you argue that this is kind of leading toward like a mandate for consolidating contracting. And personally, I do like consolidation from an efficiency perspective. But I do advocate for small businesses, and it can be it can be a huge challenge. This is not the first time we've seen consolidation happen within the government. So, can you help us kind of understand what's really going on, kind of dismiss some of these, fear tactics and, rumors that are going on? But based on the changes that you've seen, is this overhaul really truly about simplification, or are small businesses kind of, being systematically sidelined and squeezed out of acquisition?
It may be a little bit of both. It's hard to tell from the outside, just reading the overhaul segments as they come out, because when GSA and OFPP, Office of Federal Procurement Policy, publish these overhaul portions, they really just publish the text. There's a practitioner's album, there's a little bit of accompanying text, but it doesn't give small businesses the type of guidance that they're usually accustomed to when there's new policies that come out. So that's why it's incumbent on people like you to get the message out about what this overhaul means and how it's going to affect small business and how you can adjust to it. Usually the government will play part of that role, but that's not happening here, unfortunately. They're moving very fast, and they're using the executive order to move quite quickly through the process. Another important point about that is usually when the government issues new policies, like SBA rules or FAR regulations, they'll issue a proposed text of it, and then they'll get feedback from the public through a notice and comment process. And that's where they hear a lot from small businesses. There were some rules that I worked on at SBA where we received thousands of comments from small businesses on one direction or another on that rule. And we'd often adjust the rule and the text of the rule, or even make wholesale changes to the rule based on those comments. That's not happening here. The FAR, under the guise of the executive order, is just coming out with the text. And within 30 days, agencies have to take on that text through a deviation process. So it's effective basically immediately before anybody has a chance to comment on it. There is going to be notice and comment in the future, but the question is that really going to be effective? Because it's already too late. You've already put those policies into play. So is comment significantly going to change that? So back to your question, is it simplification or is it targeting small business? The the outside message of the FAR overhaul is this is trying to deregulate the federal acquisition regulation, and it's trying to cut down the volume of the FAR. The FAR online is something like 2,000 pages, and in some of these sections, they've cut over 50% of the words that are in that part. So they're going to cut down the page count significantly. However, in the course of doing that, they're taking out a lot of protections for small business that were there for a good reason to try to keep small businesses in the industrial base and try to meet the government's goals in terms of contracting with small business. So, for example, you mentioned FAR Part 10. FAR Part 10, the version that people were using up until the overhaul had 10 different protections for small business in it. And those included, this is the market research section. So those included searching SBA's dynamic small business search. It included considering set asides and looking at different types of small businesses, 8A, hub zone, service able vet, and women owned. It included coordinating with SBA's procurement center representatives. And in the overhaul, the FAR took out all 10 of those protections. So they're exactly 10 for 10 in taking those out. And there's another section, FAR Part 18, where they're also 10 for 10 in taking out protections for small business. So in cutting the words, part of the word cutting, whether you like it or not, is taking out the words that previously would allow small businesses to get a foothold in government contracting, try to build the industrial base. And with that not there anymore, it's really up to small businesses to figure out now which direction do we go in, and they're relying on guidance from people like you to figure out how to do that.
Very conflicted uh, opinion, and I try not to overly express my opinion because I know I am so opinionated, and no one needs that in their day. But every once in a while, it kind of my opinion kind of sneaks out into the world. But I'm conflicted in that I am a huge advocate for small businesses. I think that and I've walked the walk in that I've come from small businesses. I am a small business. I'm a woman owned small business. I've worked with a lot of small businesses, but small businesses grow. And that's the whole premise behind a lot of the SBA programs, the 8A program, the mentor protege programs. And we'll dive into some of this, later in the discussion. But the whole idea is you want small businesses to grow while you're bringing in and grooming in new small businesses to grow to the same level. But for decades, there has been this challenge with companies that are in that mid tier, and I kind of call it that. Um, I grew up Catholic, so like that purgatory. You're no longer small, but you're no longer large. There's no mid-tier type of, like place for the mid-tier businesses. So once you graduate out of your size standard, you're like, here, little birdie, go swim with the sharks. Like now you're big, but you're not really big. So in some regards, some of these changes I think are going to be kind of beneficial for the mid tiers. But it really does kind of put small businesses at more of a disadvantage or a challenge. And so it's going to require more collaboration, more teaming, especially for some of the conversations we're going to have later about category management and consolidation. Um, that really is kind of our new normal.
Yeah, if I could get a nickel for every time I heard Valley of Death with that issue with smalls getting so
Yes.
large that they can't quite compete with the
Mhm.
large businesses, but they're over the size standards, so they can't qualify for SBA assistance anymore. And it's a perfect time for businesses that are in that situation or close to being in that situation to make their voice known. SBA just published their proposed size standards earlier on Friday, so just last week. And the comments open until October 21st. SBA proposed to raise about 200 of the revenue-based size standards. But the big question that SBA asked is, should SBA go about lowering some of the size standards? And so you could have businesses, if
Wow.
they decided to lower the size standards, you could have businesses that are small now and that actually become large because SBA pulled the size standard down there. Now, SBA didn't actually put the numbers in and say, we are going to do this, but they asked the public to come in and comment and make their voice known as to which direction SBA should go to. Should they keep the size standards where they are when the data says that they should be lowered, or should they lower the size standard? And
Yeah.
I am opinionated as well, and I like that you let your opinions known. I put something in my newsletter, govconintelligence.com, that when SBA gets comments from businesses, it's generally that the threshold should be larger, so that when you
Yes.
are a mid-tier business, that you get a little bit more of a runway and that you can grow. Because the problem is, especially with government contractors, you win a big contract and all of a sudden you're
Yeah.
busting through the size standard, and
Yeah.
maybe you have to refuse work, or you have to refuse growth so that you can stay under that threshold.
Hmm.
Uh, the American economy, this whole
Hmm.
system is built around businesses wanting to grow and being able to find ways to be more efficient so they can grow. And it seems like having size standards that are at the level that they are now, especially if we're hearing from small businesses that they're too low, is inhibiting that sort of growth. So I did have a proposal in my newsletter for an alternative size standard, and people could go to govconintelligence.com and read more about it and make your voice known to the SBA through comment.
Yeah, no, intellectuals get on that because size standards can be a little tricky. It can, change your entire capture and bid strategy, and whether or not you can, um, pursue something, especially if you're a larger company and you've outgrown it. So, anyways, great first segment here, and we're just getting started. So we're going to keep diving a little bit deeper here into our discussion under segment two, which is rules versus discretion. What does the FAR changes mean to small businesses? And there seems to be a clear pattern emerging with the revisions to key sections, like we've talked about, but the explicit prescriptive language, like directing the agencies to consider small businesses, like you said, is being removed. It's being changed, and in its place, we're seeing some broader language, which gives contracting officers more "quote unquote" discretion. Um, to many in industry, discretion sounds like a green light to bypass some small business laws and goals. To me, it's good and bad. Sometimes I want them to have more discretion, but at the same time, we have a very greening workforce. There are, a lot of the contracting professionals are newer. They haven't quite seen and have the war wounds and battle scars and have seen, like all the, the different variations of where discretion is good vices, where discretion is bad. So, like, how does this shift from like hard coded rules to agency discretion in the FAR text kind of affect the day-to-day reality of some set-asides and the agency's duty to kind of apply the rule of two, which is a very big topic right now?
Absolutely. The rule of two is, if you don't know it already, the most important mandate that supports small business contracting. There are thousands of small business advocates across the government in OSDBU offices, as small business specialists and small business program offices at DoD. And every day they're pointing to the rule of two to say that uh, the agency needs to set aside this procurement for small businesses. And that's the way that small businesses find their opportunities. Most of the contracts that are going to small businesses in the federal government are coming through some type of set aside, small business set aside, 8A, hub zone, and whatnot. So the rule of two says that if the agency can find two or more small businesses that can perform the contract at a fair market price, the agency must set aside that contract. So all of these OSDBU offices and OSBP small business specialists, they're going out and finding small businesses like yours, two or more, and then bringing those capability statements or sources sought responses to the agency to say that the agency needs to set this aside, and that makes it unavailable for large businesses. Now, the rule of two has some complications to it. It applies to contracts, but not necessarily to orders. It has different levels to it, depending on whether the simplified acquisition threshold. The big question now is, under the FAR overhaul, will the FAR delete the rule of two in FAR Part 19? Farm Part 19 says that Above the simplified acquisition threshold, agencies need to follow the rule of two, which means it's a mandate, as you mentioned. It means that if the agencies can find two or more small businesses fair market price, they must set aside that contract. That's not in a law above the simplified acquisition threshold. That's not in a statute. It's just something that since 1964, the Navy took it on. It went government wide in 1984, and it's just been in the FAR and it made its way into SBA regulations. But the FAR overhaul drafters have said that they want to limit the FAR only to items that are in the law, that are statutory, or that are necessary for an efficient procurement system. So the big question is, since this isn't in the law, since it's just in policy, is the rule of two something that's efficient for or necessary for an efficient procurement system? Some people, I happen to be one of them, expect that the FAR actually will take out the rule of two from FAR Part 19. We'll know within the next month whether that's the case. And if that were to happen, then it would move to discretion where agencies could choose whether or not to set aside, even if there's sufficient small business competition
Yeah.
that would ordinarily satisfy the rule of two. So what you'll see if that happens is the number of set asides will go down. We're already seeing a slight decrease in the number of set asides. It's gone up every single year over the past 10 plus years. But you could see the number of set asides go down, and that would put small businesses in competition with larges for what used to be set aside.
Yeah, I'm with you. I kind of do see it being on the chopping block. I'm amazed it hasn't been codified and is more concrete. Because like you said, growing up on it, we cut our teeth on it. It's kind of one of those things we just automatically throw out and talk about. And I think this is going to be something that we all need to kind of watch and be wary of, considering there's been such a loss of knowledge and staffing within a lot of the small business offices and the OSDBUs. It's their, this administration. I'm not going to get political on here, but there's, a lot of organizations that have contracting OSDBU offices that, people that were there advocating for small businesses are no longer there. Or the office is much smaller out there. But I'm going to take a moment here to kind of plug what we do here at Intellect, in that at Intellect, we're not one of those organizations that go out and work with companies to get 8A sole sources, or going out to get sole sourcing and set asides. My philosophy is, even if you are an 8A or if you're a small business, at some point you're going to have to be competitive. And so we work with customers on learning and knowing and being competitive while you have some of these protections, while you have some of these safeguards, so that when you graduate out of your site standard, or if things like this change in the FAR, that you're not kind of caught flat-footed and unprepared and you can't think competitively. So my task here to our intellectuals is be prepared, be strategic, learn how to be competitive, because it's not going away, and it's just something that is good practice in general. So I appreciate your perspective on that.
Yeah, that's a great message to send to your intellectuals and the small businesses that are out there. I hear at some point in history, it used to be the case that you could get by on your 8A certification or the fact that
Mhm.
you're a small business, and especially on HubZone, there's only a few thousand HubZone firms, so you're very much in demand for subcontracting. Maybe that'll still be the case for some of the programs. Again, there's only a few thousand hub zone contractors, so that may be a program that benefits from some of these changes. But it's not going to be the case for most businesses that they're going to be able to get by on just the fact that they're 8A or they're small business. So in your capability statement, if you're leading with the fact that you have this certification or you're this status, that's probably not going to be enough in this new era. You're going to have to show that you can compete, you can deliver, you can meet the agency's mission, and you're following this efficiency mandate that all the agencies are on.
Mhm.
As you mentioned, the agencies are cutting their own staff on small business side, on contracting officer side, to become more efficient in their own right, and you're seeing that trend on the contractor side too. And it's actually exacerbating a decline that we've seen over the past 10 to 15 years. Data that I collected when I was at SBA. showed that the number of small businesses that contract with the federal government has gone down 50%. If you go back to
Mm,
2009, it was 120,000,
yeah,
and then in the most recent year, 2024, it was just 60,000. So it's gone down 50%. The government was making some progress. It was a lower decrease or less decrease in the most recent year. Part of that progress was getting to 180 plus $billion and trying to attract more businesses in with higher goals. Some of that stuff is going to go away, and because of this consolidation, you'll probably see that 60,000 contractor number go down even more as contracts
yeah,
consolidate, as agencies consolidate, and as agencies seek more efficiency.
yeah, exactly. So again, double-edged sword, kind of necessary, but there is going to be some contrition here. So let's move to segment three, which is the mentor to protege program, which is under a microscope. And I have a love-hate relationship with the mentor protege program. And so, Sam, you are a prolific writer. I love everything you put out there. In your recent article, you nailed the central conflict with the SBA's mentor protege program in that it's a multi-billion, that's with a B, $1 billion lifeline for many small businesses. But the SBA is now kind of threatening and, some major changes, and worried that, these joint ventures are winning a quote unquote inordinate amount of work. Um, and you did talk and name names in that article about one specific contractor. But is the popular program becoming a victim of its own success? And how serious are these threats, like from the SBA? Because it seems like if you're successful, you kind of get punished for it. So what's your take on this?
Yes, very serious. I'll start with a fascinating tidbit that I learned when I was looking at that article for govconintelligence.com. When the mentor protege program first started, and it's 27 years old now, when it first started, it was envisioned as, first of all, only for 8A firms. So only 8A firms could be proteges, and that was the case for over a decade in the program. But also mentors would be limited to either existing 8A firms or graduated 8A firms. So it would not be large businesses or even just normal small businesses that weren't previously 8A. The program's changed a lot
I'm
since then.
I'm
So
I'm
now
old enough to
any
remember that.
back with when it was 8A. I actually started with the new mentor protege program as their first attorney when it became the all small mentor protege program. I like that name. Was that a good name? And back then it was two separate programs. It was one that was 8A and then the other one that was the all small program. And I was one of the first attorneys for the all small program as that was getting off the ground. And that was the shift. That was changing from when the protege had to be 8A to a protege now can be any small business. And then, of course, a mentor can be a large business, and you have some of the largest contractors in the country serving as mentors. And the issue that I hear all the time on that is, okay, why is this humongous contractor able to get 40% of a contract? That's the threshold in joint ventures, and count as a small business for that. Makes it very difficult for small businesses that don't have mentor protege relationships and aren't in joint ventures to compete against a company that has this massive contractor backing it financially and doing 40% of the work. So SBA has heard a lot of these complaints. They looked at some of the data. I did a data analysis when I was at SBA, and what I found is yes, the Mentor Protege program is a multi-billion-dollar program. In my article for GovCon Intelligence, I came up with a number that was about $14 billion, and that is growing year after year. It's not a huge amount of small business government contracting as compared to the 180 billion altogether. But in some industries, it does seem to be putting significant pressure on businesses that are not in mentor protege relationships. So people have been commenting at govconintelligence.com to say, for example, in the roofing industry, there's a lot of mentor protege pairs, and it's making things more difficult for companies that don't have that relationship. And we see that in some of the VA contracts that have come out recently. The mentor protege joint ventures are extremely successful on that. So last year, in 2024, SBA proposed some potential changes that would really cut back on the mentor protege program, as far as possibly saying mentor protege joint ventures cannot even win multiple award contracts. That would be a big difference, since everybody's moving to multiple award contracts, and that would put some brakes on the program. Uh, they also proposed limiting the duration for contracts that mentor protege joint ventures can get to 5 years. Those two proposals did not make it all the way through. I think SBA basically ran out of time in 2024. There's a lot of things that SBA wanted to do. They released some proposals and finalized them, but not these in particular. But SBA did earlier in 2025 put out additional concerns that they had about the mentor protege program. And the initial time when SBA started putting these concerns out, SBA labeled it as a perception that mentor protege joint ventures are taking over, and it was that perception of inordinate contract awards that led SBA to come up with these proposals. My point of view and what I put into the GovCon Intelligence article is that SBA really should look at what is the reality out there. Don't just work off of perception. There is data that's available. I haven't gone deeper than what I put online, but it is possible to look and see what is the exact amount here with mentor protege joint ventures. Are they really squeezing out small businesses? And then if you're on the other side, if you're on the small business side, looking at these numbers going up, should you consider getting into a mentor protege joint venture, or just a normal joint venture too? You don't have to necessarily be part of a mentor protege team to be in a joint venture. And the answer probably, as you're looking at, is you should strongly consider that. I mean, there are things you give up. You're obviously giving up part of the work with the mentor protege relationship. You may be giving up part of the equity in your business, because
Hmm.
mentors can take some of that. You're giving up some of the authority on contracts, and sometimes these things don't work out, and the mentor ends up terminating the relationship, and there are provisions for that. But if you're not in this, then are you really going to be able to compete on some of these humongous contracts that now are being designated as best in class and the number one choice for the government?
Yeah.
And as the government goes more and more to consolidated contracts that might be in the tens or even hundreds of millions of dollars, is an individual small business going to have the past performance and the capability to perform those if it doesn't have help, either at the subcontracting level or at the mentor protege level? So that does make it more incumbent on small businesses not just to go out on their own and do this. The days of just being able to walk down to the federal office building and say, "Oh, I want a contract," and being able to talk to a contracting officer or program manager are well over. Now you're looking at national government-wide contracts, and you need to come in with not just one capability, but you need to be able to check off every single box on there. It might be 15, 20 things you have to do. In order to do that, you need to figure out how are you going to build these partnership relationships. Part of the way to do that is through the mentor protege program.
Yeah. And so, to answer your question on whether or not you should join one or create one, it is a definitive yes. I would say that the majority of small businesses are either in conversations right now, they're exploring it, and they're vetting potential joint venture members. And you're right, you don't have to enter into a joint venture as a mentor protege. You can enter them as a joint venture, and there are very successful ones where they've spun off and created more joint ventures for that. And I love the fact that the SBA was feeling or like got the impression that, like this is, like shouldn't we make decisions and see things rooted in like actual numbers and data, which is kind of ironic,
Well,
but
it's just vibes. We get
yeah,
vibes.
I'm getting this vibe, like I'm feeling, and I'm not part of that generation. I'm a Gen X, so we don't express our feelings like that, which is kind of funny. But I'm not a millennial, so we don't have
You got to
feelings.
let it out, hon. You got to let it out.
But I know, right? But yes, joint ventures are a plus. And if you look at the scorecard bids, if you look at the Oasis Pluses, the SP3, like when you look at the awardees list, and even IHT, the VA just released the awards for their IHT 2.0. If you look at the awardees, at least a third, if not more, of awardees on any type of GWAC, IDIQ, or BIC, they're joint ventures. The name may not have JV in it. Some of these companies have gotten really creative in how they name their joint ventures so that you can't tell. Smoke and mirrors, like we're not a joint venture, but we really kind of are. especially for the scorecard bids, you can't. No one company can possibly, especially for the different tracks for the set asides, meet some of the requirements. And I think GSA did it really great with Oasis Plus in that they changed the minimum bar for entry at the different set asides so that you were truly getting true, small businesses, true SDVs, true WOSBs, without the need to form a joint venture. So those dollars are 100% going to be going to small businesses and not 40% to a large business who's backing up, another small business in there. So again, it's just playing smart, playing the game. Not I didn't make up the rules. I'm just going to play the game, but I think, small businesses need to be kind of aware what the rules are out there and what the expectation is.
Well, I did make up the rules, but SBA can only do so much. The thing
Right.
that we heard when we went around the country talking about this issue with the Mentor Protege program is that the past performance requirements are too high for a isolated, standalone small business to satisfy. So again, if you need to do 15 things, a small business is probably not going to be able to do those 15 things unless it's been around for quite a long time. So that's why you have to engage in this partnership and consider the mentor protege program. SBA tried to take some measures to bring down the past performance requirements, and that was part of the effort in saying mentor protege joint ventures might not be eligible for 5-year contracts or might not be eligible for multiple award contracts. But there's really only so much that the SBA rules can do on that. It's really the agency that awards the contract that decides what the past performance requirements are going to be. And if they're going to put it at 15, 20 things, there's not really much that SBA can say to prevent that.
Yeah. Well, this is a really great segue into our next segment, which is category management squeeze. And can small businesses compete? So I kind of want to, let's pull back the lens a little bit more and look at the bigger picture when it comes to category management. And many of the FAR changes seem to be happening in service of a larger government-wide type of, strategy, which is category management. And this, I think it's the government's way to kind of push to buy, obviously common goods and services as one big massive enterprise using fewer, contracts to do it. It's more efficient to kind of do that, but it does squeeze out, the smaller niche, smaller type of businesses. And your own writing in your articles, you've highlighted this. You've kind of warned that category management kind of shifts contracts to some of the bigger national players, like we've talked about, and it puts really big pressure on like local firms who geographically, don't work nationwide. So how does this kind of like top-down strategy to consolidate contracts fundamentally change like the playing field? And do you think that small businesses will survive when the government is kind of intentionally kind of designing like a marketplace, even though they are pushing things towards GSA schedules and things like that? That kind of seems to favor the more mature, larger companies.
Th Many small businesses will survive because small businesses are resilient and they'll adjust, but unfortunately, there will be some that choose just not to go forward with government contracting. The way it used to be, and surprisingly, in the data that I put up on govconintelligence.com, the way that has persisted up until just a few years ago is that local small businesses could win government contracts to a great degree. So they could really go down to the federal government office or to the local base and get, say, a landscaping contract or an IT contract. You see it where I am in Virginia all the time. There's a lot of local IT companies that work within the DMV for agencies that are here locally. And those local businesses win about 50% of the contracts, which is much higher than I expected it to be. Category management is an effort by the government to consolidate contracts and buy as one government. It's based off of a private model that IKEA uses, Target uses, where you look at your whole spend, not just one particular Target store, but across the whole country and internationally and say, oh, we're going to source this thing, bath bombs, we just bought some bath bombs at Target yesterday. We're going to source bath bombs from this particular company that could be thousands of miles away from the store where you're buying it. And the local business that might have been able to support that company in the past, that's not really a player anymore because they can't compete on price or service or value, whatever it is that puts this preferred business in play. The federal government wants to move in that direction because they see the benefits that have accrued to the private firms that have adopted this model. And their mantra is we're going to save the taxpayer money by moving to these more efficient firms, which oftentimes are national firms that can serve many different agencies and many different offices at one time. That's why they've created this designation of best in class. That's the highest level of category management, where they say these are the best contracts with the best contractors. We've looked at their past performance, we've vetted them. These are the guys that we're going to do the most business with. For small businesses that are designated best in class, that can be a really great thing. So now, best in class is maybe like 14% of government contracting. That could go much, much higher. That could go to 20, 30, 40%. And so if you're in the best in class group, you could be getting millions of dollars more. The downside of that is there's only 5% of small business vendors that are in the best in class contracts and have been winning work through the best in class contracts. So you look at that 60,000 number that I mentioned before, only about 3,000 of those 60,000 won work on best in class contracts. So you have 95% of small businesses that are on the outside looking in and saying, "Oh, I'd love to be part of that group. I'd love to be the one selling bath bombs to Target across the country." And the only way that you're going to be able to do that if you're selling something that those best in class firms are providing is to partner with them, or on the next contract, whatever it is, the next Oasis plus plus, be able to find a way to get in there, because the government is saying through category management, we're going to try to find the best value, the most efficient contractors, and we're just going to keep pushing our orders to those companies rather than trying to go out and find local firms and spending the time to do a lot more market research on a local basis. Instead, this is going to be more of a national buy, and that's going to consolidate contracting with those 5% of small businesses.
Yeah. I love the fact that you're a girl dad and it's really showing right now. So like bath bombs, I love that analogy.
I spend a lot of time in the makeup aisle at Target, just kind of scrolling my phone while my girls are looking at mascara. They keep asking me
Well,
too that, will I let them curl my eyelashes? And so far
goodness.
I've said no, but maybe the next appearance I'll have them prep for the appearance.
You'll be all glammed up. That's hilarious. I'm a boy mom, so bath bombs are not in my future. Balls and sticks are in my, like
We have
at
some of
my
that
house and
too.
in
We've
my
got, volleyball,
yeah.
soccer, and basketball. So we spend a lot of time shuttling people to practices.
Yeah, exactly. It's the new parent normal here. But no, I like how you explained that. And I think this is the reason why a lot of the Bix and Shellacs are the bane of my existence. And I probably kill more dreams when companies come to me and say, "Hey, should I get on this vehicle or should I go after this, like multiple award IDIQ?" And I'm like, "What are you going to do with it? What, do your customers buy from it? Because you're going to be spending tens of thousands of dollars going after a vehicle that you will never see a dime. And the minimum guarantee will not even cover my cost in your time and effort to go after it. So, don't think that there are these dollar signs just because you get on it. But there's a lot of times companies will bid from a place of FOMO. So it's like that whole fear of missing out. If you're not on a vehicle, you might be missing an opportunity. And so it's like this vicious hamster wheel cycle that contractors have to go through in order to, really stay competitive, be open, have a vehicle. But I think the government really needs to understand that, there's a cost to industry in order to like bid and pursue, like some of these vehicles. And as you were explaining category management and um, how the government can kind of go by to one area, it kind of got me thinking about the Costco model. And I think maybe you and I need to kind of explore that a little bit more because The Costco model, I think, is really kind of interesting because they mass buy from a lot of different companies. Companies come in and interview with them and pitch their products all the time. And I'll tell you, if you get a Costco contract, you're like, on easy street moving forward because now it's going to be released to, hundreds of stores, but each Costco geographically is different. I don't know if you've noticed, but coming from Virginia, we lived in Reston, and the Sterling Costco was so good for Asian food, but you couldn't go down to
Right.
Chantilly and expect to get the same thing because they, like the the Sterling store was the one that premiered all the new stuff. So they got all the new products and, all the exotic foods and things like that. And then everybody else in Springfield and, Pentagon Row and stuff like that, all those Costco's got the plain Jane, like normal type of Costco things. But the government really is kind of moving towards that type of Costco model where you gotta have a membership to get there. So you gotta kind of, pay to play. You gotta, like be listed on their, pre vendors list in order for the government to kind of, get to all the services and products that are out there that, the contractors sell to the government, which is a lot.
On your speaking my language, I have my executive member check up on my refrigerator, so maybe the government should consider that too, getting 2% back from what they're
Yeah,
selling to what they're buying from the contractors. They should get 2% of that back.
government, you need to do the Costco executive member model, okay? Like, give me a call. I can tell you about that. So yeah, I'm stirring up my check too. That's hilarious. Um,
One point about the best in class mandate. The FAR put out this overhaul for FAR Part 8, which talks about who you have to go to first, which contracts you have to go to first. And it said you have to use best in class first, then use government wide contract. Don't create your own contract, government,
yep.
if there's one that already exists. We were talking about the rule of two and how the rule of two is not in the statute. That best in class mandate is not in the statute either. So the FAR Council has been saying, oh, we're trying to limit the FAR to stuff that's just in statute. But then this best in class mandate comes out. It's not in statute. It's not an executive order. It isn't an OMB memo. So I guess now we're saying that OMB memos can go into the FAR. There's actually an OMB memo about the rule of two as well. So, in a way, we've seen a shift in this far overhaul from just trying to cut down words and cut down things that are in statute to things that are in statute to now inserting the policy preferences of the procurement policymakers into the FAR. And see a little of that in the protest section that came out recently about saying protests are not for just fact finding. That's not in the statute either. That's just somebody's opinion, very informed opinion, but an opinion that they're putting into the FAR. So as we see this overhaul come out, that's part of the deficiency in the process. Is when there are things that are not in statute, the public does not have the opportunity when it comes out to comment before it becomes effective. And
Mm,
usually that would be the process. You have a chance to comment. That doesn't mean that you shouldn't comment. There's still opportunities out there. They have a button where you can submit informal feedback. There will be more formal comment in the future. But every time something like this comes out, we used to hear from thousands of small businesses about it, about their effect. Things like what you just said, it's going to cost us tens of thousands of dollars. There's the real impact on our bottom line. The drafters need to hear that. They need to hear that repeatedly so they get the message that, oh, first of all, there are people that are watching out there that are paying attention, that affects them, and that also that there are some costs to the other side of this. There may be some benefit in terms of efficiency and saving money, but there are costs on the other side of this that used to be the area that the government was focusing on. The reason for small business preferences in the first place is not necessarily to save the government money, it's to help small businesses across the country get some investment in communities that rely on government infrastructure there. And if the government's consolidating contracts through best in class and category management, you're going to lose some of those benefits. And I think the FAR drafters would be interested to hear in the context and the background and the detail of how that's going to happen.
yeah, no, absolutely. And that's the reason why I think reverse industry days are so important to different agencies just to hear back from industry. from our perspective, when you do and say certain things, this is how it's interpreted, this is what it causes to do, and this is the cost impact for that. So yeah, exactly. Submit your comments today. So our last
Yes.
segment
Pound
here
that comment
is
button, folks.
right, find the comment button. Exactly. Push the easy button. So last segment is what to do. So I always like to close out each of the episodes with action steps for our leaders. So let's kind of bring it all together for actionable advice. And we've discussed the overhaul that favors consolidation, policy shift that, with clear rules to agencies' discretion, category management, we just talked about. It's kind of shaping and reshaping the marketplace. And so it sounds more than just, rule changes. It's kind of shifting the landscape a little bit. It's going to look different. So if we were to get a little tactical, for small business leaders listening now, for our intellectuals, what are the top two strategic changes that they must do to their pipeline, their teaming decisions, their business strategies for them to be competitive in this new environment?
Sure. The first one is definitely pay attention. Again, these things are coming out without a whole lot of small business guidance. So small businesses need to find ways to figure out what's going on. And part of it can be your podcast. It could be my newsletter at govconintelligence.com, where we're really breaking down what the effect is on small businesses. And as we just said, pound that comment button. You still have an opportunity as a small business to tell the government how this is going to affect you. As we mentioned, the government oftentimes is just working off of vibes. They're saying, oh, this is the perception, this is what we're hearing, or this is what Costco is doing, and we just want to do exactly what Costco is doing. That's not always going to work in government contracting. So if you have a situation as a government contractor where this is going to cost you thousands of dollars, tens of thousands of dollars, you need to make that known to the government so that they can understand the two sides of everything. That yeah, maybe it'll save taxpayer money. That's not necessarily certain, but there's a cost here at the local level or at the small business level. So really, let your voice be known. When I was at the SBA, we used to get these comments, and we really would read every single one of them. We'd actually sit there in a circle with our laptops out and have a spreadsheet out, and we'd say, okay, you got comment 7, you've got comment 14, and these were thousands and thousands of comments. Do I know that that's happening now? It might be Grok that's reading these, but eventually somebody's going to get the message if there's enough comments to say, oh, we might want to rethink whether we really want to cost small businesses tens, hundreds of thousands of dollars through something that we don't necessarily know the impact of. And the second is, yes, you need to look at your teaming agreements, your partnership agreements. These contracts are going to get larger. Part of that is just on the government workforce side, because there's going to be fewer 1102s. You're already seeing, agencies just riff their entire contracting staff. There's fewer capacity for contracting officers to come up with new contracts. So the easiest thing, and I certainly saw this when I was in government, is to go to an existing contract, use the GSA schedule, or use CIO SP3. And because there's just fewer contracting officers, they're not going to be able to go out and create these new contracts. Even 8A sole source is probably more difficult than going to a GWAC that already has existing contractors on it. You don't have to negotiate the contract. You don't have to evaluate past performance. You can just go issue an order. So try to get on those vehicles if you can. I know there's a value proposition. You mentioned it before, and you have to think about, are you actually going to get something out of it? But if you're not on it, on your outside looking in, that's going to make things much more difficult for you to get in. The best way to handle that is look at subcontractors, build those relationships. There's a lot more opportunities now with virtual conferences to be able to meet up with companies that are already in the game and figure out whether your capabilities match with them. So the networking, partnerships, relationships become that much more important when the government is consolidating and moving to potentially just 5% of contractors, or at least a very limited amount of the number of contractors that we were working with before.
Yeah, exactly. And I think with fewer 1102s, as you mentioned, I think it's even more critical for industry to stay ahead, stay super knowledgeable about some of the different alternatives, some of the changes. And I'm finding and I'm advocating that for our customers to be able to kind of go in more educated, than who they're speaking to on the government side so that they can give them the most updated information. Because it is very difficult to kind of stay on top of everything, and not one person has, all the information. I know your GovCon intelligence is definitely one place. We've got a lot of colleagues in the industry who are, publishing and talking. Steve Coprince, Josh Duval, Peter Lierney, Shauna Weatherly. There's so many industry people that you and I follow. We know, personally, that keep us up to date on different aspects of it, because we're all kind of have our niche about what we like to talk about and what we're more knowledgeable in. And if you piece all of us together, you kind of have like the bigger picture here, to kind of help understand and navigate through this very uneasy Moana waters that we're that
Yep.
we're sailing.
I should mention Shauna and I used to work together when she was at GSA and I was at SBA. Part of my responsibility was to be SBA's reviewer for SAM.gov changes, and Shauna was on the SAM.gov team. So we used to meet at least every month to go over changes to SAM.gov. So if you have a problem with the way SAM.gov looks, which most people do, you can go to Shauna about that.
Yeah, well, I did have a hashtag when the new Beta Sam was released, and so my hashtag was Beta Sam sucks. And so, yes, that will live in infamy. You should search on that on LinkedIn. That's We had a lot of fun with it. But
Age of Beta
anyway,
Sam. Going back to Orca, you remember Orca and
oh, I
CCR?
miss Orca. I miss Orca and CCR. Like, yes, that is like the OG. There were some really good things about that, and when they changed, I didn't like it. Didn't like it one bit. Can't find it. We still can't find shit. So I'm just like, okay. But anyway, so let's do a quick wrap up here with some key takeaways on this episode. We talked about so many different things about shifting in the federal contracting area, the FAR overhaul, which is, on everyone's lips right now, and category management. They're not just buzzwords, they're really impacting how companies and businesses do work with the government. And so you definitely need to stay up to date in that, and that this top down shift towards consolidation really is favoring some of the more mature, larger businesses out there. The one thing that I found was really interesting in our conversation was replacing clear rules with discretion, and learning more about things that were not codified, that we I just assumed that they were statute, and that they were written down somewhere, but they're not. So that was kind of enlightening. And also the mentor protege program, excuse me, and teaming. It's not new. It's starting and continuing to evolve, and I think that's something that if you intellectuals are not pursuing, discussing, don't know anything about, you're kind of late to the game, and so you need to kind of catch up a little bit, because it's definitely not going away. And obviously, reading Sam Lee's GovCon Intelligence newsletter, where would we be without it? And so, Sam, your last thoughts and parting words here before we wrap up.
The world is changing. You've got to keep up. You can do that with these resources that you mentioned, govconintelligence.com, your podcast, all the people that are out there providing content on LinkedIn. But while the world's changing, you still have a voice and you should make your voice known.
That's very true. Hit the comment button. So I'm gonna have to come up with a sticker comment button instead of the easy button. So I don't know. Staples might come after me if I do that. But and this concludes our episode on the FAR overhaul. I want to encourage everyone to subscribe to Ton's Two Cents podcast wherever you listen to it. We're on Patreon, Spotify, and YouTube. We have changed our format, which is really great. A lot of the content that was locked in our vault is being unlocked for those who are not previously subscribers. And so we'll have new episodes for you every other Wednesday, and we're unlocking past episodes every other Wednesday too. So we're still a weekly podcast, but we're doing it in a little different way. So Sam, thanks for taking the time here to kind of help us navigate and make some sense of some of these changes, and giving us a different perspective and a clear eye on what to expect on the road ahead. And so before we go, where can our listeners find you and subscribe to GovCon Intelligence?
It's been my pleasure to be on. Thanks so much for having me. The website is govconintelligence.com. You can go there, subscribe, and right now it's free. Come out with new articles about once or twice a week.
That's great. And just like myself, you're also on LinkedIn. So I definitely recommend connecting with us on LinkedIn here. I'm a bit of a LinkedIn snob. So if you do connect with me on LinkedIn, make sure you put a message and say why we should connect and where you found my information. Otherwise, I think that you're a bot from Russia somewhere and I'm not going to accept your invitation. And thanks again, Intellectuals, for listening here today. And remember, you have to think big to win big. Be an intellectual. And until next time, keep pushing the boundaries of possibilities.